we are super lucky to have Paige representing. I'll tell you. Well, so Paige is actually based out of Atlanta, I believe. Paige.
Yes.
I mean, I know you're kind of a global citizen. So
well, I'm sitting here in Rosemary Beach at the moment, but we work out of Atlanta quite often.
And okay, since you admitted you did Rosemary Beach, I will tell you, Rosemary Beach is a lovely community on the other side of Florida, and they've got fantastic tennis courts there. And I know Atlanta is a tennis haven, so I'm a big fan of both. But Paige has been a very successful investor in startups, unicorns. Most recently, he's been invested in a SPAC. And I was hoping that we could get like Paige to kind of give your perspective on what you've done, how you come around to this, kind of like what was your journey at first, when you had some critical thoughts about you realized that this is the way to go, this is how to do it. And then, how do you separate winners from losers today? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak? So Paige, why don't you take over, introduce yourself, tell us your background, and go from there.
Cool. Thank you, Marty. Appreciate it. Hey guys, happy to share the quick journey here. I'm a very risk-on investor. I'm also a risk-on operator. I started life going from the Marine Corps to the intelligence community, and I started my first business as a private military company. I decided to go in, leave the government, and build a private military before the Iraq War. So I flew into Jordan and then snuck across the border illegally and built a very large private military company called Lincoln Group, which I sold many, many years ago in a past life. I became a tech investor, and this is a long journey, but I looked at a lot of options, and I decided that I liked the leverage of being an early stage tech investor. So the quick story here is I was an operator in the military. I built a private military company, sold it, and became a tech investor. For the last 12 years, I've been mainly focused on tech investing, and most of that early stage tech investing. I've done at this point I've led personally 113 deals and deployed almost $100 million into these early stage tech deals. What I'm going to talk to you about, I am personally very focused on the unicorn hunting, because as much as there is to learn about how to run a fund and all these other details, I like to make it very simple for folks. When you're in venture, this is a business about massive wins. If you can't find a fund manager or you can't find unicorns, you have to leave the business. Now, venture debt providers and other unique folks who I'm interested in backing as well could be different stories. But when you are a manager or backing managers, you have to find unicorns. So I'll share a few of my experiences. So I did 113 deals. 16 of those are now unicorn companies. Now, 10 of those are companies that I funded in their seed stage. 3 of them, I was their very first investor ever. Now, I'll talk very briefly about this personal experience, but more importantly, where I think the market's going. I started life deploying my own capital as an angel. And I would go out, and I moved from Northern Virginia out to DC 12 years ago with this crazy idea that I would be one of those guys picking tech companies. Now, think of this. My entire career before this was Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, but I was also a builder. And I had this belief that I could come to Silicon Valley with my newfound riches, and I could go and find the next Facebooks, Googles, whatever's going to happen. And the truth is, it did happen. I did find it, but I approached it very differently. As an early stage investor, I didn't try to compete with MBAs, and I didn't try to compete with other finance folks. That's not my skill set. I am extremely good at financial modeling. I'm extremely good at operations. I'm extremely good at high risk activities. But my edge was understanding people. One of my focus areas was human intelligence when I was in. And I decided to focus on the human factors that make founders great. I spent essentially the last 12 years doing first desk research and eventually with my own dollars, recon by fire, throwing money at people and seeing what stuck. And I made very diligent notes on every founder I met with, not just the founders I backed, but the founders I passed on, the founders I talked to. And I built a psychological model. I haven't ever published this. I'll talk about it a little bit. I built a founder framework. And the very simple reason is I thought a lot of VCs were sort of misleading themselves into believing they could understand a company at early stage through a 3 or 5 year financial plan or an understanding of the market or some DFS model. That's just all BS because none of that's true. And the products that you see at early stage are going to evolve. And the markets that you look at are going to change 8, 10, 12 years down the road. The only thing, in my opinion, that was worth knowing was the people. And I think someone else was alluding to looking at people and spending weekends with them. I mean, in fact, I've had quite a few of these billion-dollar founders stay the weekend or weeks at my house or come skiing and snowboarding with me or working out at the gym with me. The human element is the most important decision I make. I don't even get to the business plan, the business model, and I do get to that part, but I get there after I get through the people. And I have this model that I call VICE, and it has nothing to do with vice. It's just a simple way to remember it. It's vision, intelligence, character, and execution. There are 37 measurable characteristics. And as I've trained teams and hired emerging managers, I train them in this model so they can understand how I think. And there are 10 behaviors I train people to use, because essentially, if you want to dumb it down, you need to elicit information from people. I don't want startup founders knowing that I'm interested in their locus of control. And locus of control is just a fancy ass word that means, do you think you control the world, or does the world kick you in the ass? So I don't want to ask a founder, hey, when you're running around the world, do you think you're the one in charge, or is the world kicking you down? I ask them about their family, their church, their sports, their life, and people hear me talk to a founder and they're like, you didn't ask anything about the business, or maybe a little bit. I ask them about the football team, wrestling, their father dying, war, church. I mean, whatever it was in their life, I'm looking for the inflection points in this person's life. I want to know what they did and how they make choices. I want to know what kind of person they are. And so I'll give you a quick rundown. Vision, I'm looking for people with big, crazy visions that you sometimes you just have to jump into the science fiction and ask yourself, if they're right, how really, really right are they? But you also need a person that has a big vision and can convey that to others. That person needs to be an evangelist for their company. Intelligence is probably the easiest one to figure out. When you're talking to a founder, you're trying to figure out, are they smart enough for the business they're building? But I also give them bonus points for having experience and knowledge and learning. You'll see quite often a second or third time founder will have an edge because of the lessons learned. Character, I can go into this in depth, like so long, but really for me, character comes down to this intestinal fortitude to go through the hardest things in life. These are the founders who, no matter how many times you kick them down, they're going to get back up. And also importantly, they have the extra, just the leadership, the raw power to pick up the rest of their team and help push them across the line as well. It's not just a solo team. So I'm looking for that special character. And execution, this is not business execution when I say it. I do ask about those skills. But in this, remember, this is founder. This is not about evaluating a great father or a great public company CEO. I'm looking for startup founder execution. And that is a just insane willingness to experiment and do unscalable things and try things that might even be embarrassing if you cared about your personal image. The great startup founders are willing to go out and experiment and fail, and they do it because they're trying to learn. They believe so much in their business that they have this just genetic predisposition to go try and put themselves out there. So that's how I started life. I started life being the guy on my own, picking these founders. And I funded a dozen multi-billion-dollar companies at seed stage. Now, as I've evolved, where I'm at in my family office now is we still do the early stuff. And we have a fund called Outlander Labs where we put in our money and other people invest alongside us. The bigger shift for me, though, is I'm starting to look at other emerging managers. I've picked two, and I want to increasingly start to take what I've learned, pick other emerging managers. And what I learned from other family offices, a lot of it, we look and we pick, but I actually want to be a little bit more active when I pick emerging managers. I want to take my own 12 years of experience and start to pass some of my lessons learned. And I want to learn from these emerging managers. So we are going to go out there in the next few years and pick more emerging managers to work with us. If they are in a stage where we think our framework or our lessons learned will help, we want to become a resource for the emerging managers that we back. The third part, and this is where I get into unicorn hunting, isn't just about early stage. If you had asked me a decade ago, I thought unicorn hunting was all about get in early and be that first guy that writes 100 grand, 500 grand in the earliest stages. And I think unicorn hunting is a little bit more nuanced as I think about my family. I think of unicorn hunting from the seed stage all the way to the FPO, right to that final public offering, right before they go public, and even past that point. So how I'm segregating my investing is I'm allocating to the early stage, which are funds that we actively manage. We're allocating to new fund managers that we think are complementary or additive to our own investment strategy. And the third part is we are starting to do what we call early growth or FPO. And we've done this in the past. We put $40 million into Clover Health 5 years ago when they were burning $3 million a month. And you just saw Chamath bought them for about $3.7 billion. And we're hoping that that holds up over the next 5.5 months here because we have a 6-month standoff. But we've done SpaceX and Open Door, and we've done other funds, other companies at that 100 million to a couple $1 billion valuation. We did a large allocation to SpaceX 5 years ago, and it spent last night going through future allocations. There's one thing you can do in life. You can probably just throw a boatload of dough at SpaceX, and you're probably going to do really well. I've got no upside there other than that I'm a big believer and I'm deep in it. And I think it's a pretty simple investment strategy into a business that will most likely be $1 trillion plus someday. And then I think about public markets and the fact that I need to put more allocation to the public markets. But the bigger view here is that pre-seed, emerging managers, early growth FPO, and public networks, we are building a sort of coordinated strategy where each of those layers informs the other. We think that being early stage investors has made us better at picking emerging managers. We think that those early funds that we manage and those early managers that we back inform our early growth pre-IPO investments. And we think all of that activity informs our public market investing. And obviously this sounds crazy to some folks. My big meta at this moment in a post-COVID world is that I am probably tripling down in tech. I think it is crazy to put all your eggs into early stage or everything just in the late stage. But I think we've had 2 decades of tech acceleration. I think many other smart folks here have said it already. And I am bullish on tech across the world and across all industries. I have done well across enterprise and consumer and developer tools and healthcare. So we're going to balance risk across various stages, but we're going very heavy into tech because we just believe tech is the world. Tech touches every piece of life and business. It touches everything, and the whole world just got accelerated with COVID. We're also very interested in emerging markets. I think, and this is much crazier and riskier, but I'm looking for an emerging manager in Nigeria. There's a few other emerging markets that I've spent time in. I funded one of the first successful companies out in Africa called Andela. I'm a big believer in emerging markets in Africa and Eastern Europe, and even like our fund now focused on Southeast United States. I think new emerging markets with high potential of engineering, quality of life are going to do quite well in the future. And with that, I'll stop boring you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions and share what I've learned and what I've messed up over the last 12 years.
Pete, got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
So real quick, you talk about kind of getting into the headspace of the manager and understanding them and at a very deep level, what they're about. Yeah. And not just the manager, but I'll call it the deal sponsor.
Yeah.
The person that's got the deal, right? So, I noticed that there's a lot of immigrants on those. You've invested in Elon Musk. People don't realize he's an immigrant. Right? He came from another country to the United States. Yeah. You look at the guys who run half the software firms, the large ones are from India or other countries like that. Is that part of the whole your character analysis in terms of like the ability to overcome conflict, or it's a special person who says, okay, I'm gonna leave my country and my culture and go to the United States because I think it's a better fit.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's 2 points. One, I'll plug someone who I have no interest in. There is a fund out there called Unshackled Ventures, which I'm looking at because they're on their 3rd fund. They back immigrant founders, and they're interesting because they actually provide value-add services to immigrants, which I think gives them a unique ability to win a deal. And they've had a 100% hit rate on getting immigrants U.S. citizenship. To your point, immigrants create immense value for our country. To directly answer your question, we do not look for immigrants in our framework, but we do look for people who've overcome the lowest of the lows. There's a lady who I'm probably about to back. Once again, in the healthcare space, I think she is tackling a massive tech-enabled service network, and she comes from nowhere, Mississippi, just the poorest of the poor, inspired by her double amputee grandma, and she's solving the non-medical transportation space. So I do look at what people have overcome. It doesn't mean that if you come from wealth or opportunity, and there are many ways to overcome adversity and demonstrate your ability to persevere. It's not just about immigration. It's not just about money. And so I look for the trauma and just the hard things that hit us in life. And the reality is there are many great founders out there who, and this is one I struggle with, when I meet young founders who haven't had to face adversity, it's difficult for me to judge their character. Right. And that's why one of the things, at West Point, we have this, if I can remember the saying now, upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that on other days, on other fields will bear the fruits of victory. What it meant was we cared about sports, not for sports' sake, but because of the leadership lessons and the character and integrity that it takes to wake up every day and get your butt beat in and to work hard with a team and keep going with things, right? Like, people forget that sometimes, like, whether it's sports or family or whatever that doesn't seem relevant, it is very relevant. The people we invest in, like how they conduct their lives, whether that is sports or theater or some early business or an internship, all of that is an expression of this person that we are trusting with our money and our time. So it's not just about immigrants, but I do value immigrants a great deal.
Right. I think, somebody once told me, they were like a professional athlete. They said that there's a difference between sportsmanship and gamesmanship. And so they usually fell on the side of the sportsman. Like, the goal of sportsmanship was to get to a higher level.
Yeah.
Gamesmanship is to win. And there's nothing wrong with gamesmanship. You see it in all pro sports, but it's not the essence. You might see somebody say something when somebody's taking a 3-point shot on a basketball court. So I know you have a framework, which I think is super interesting, but are there any tells that you have that, like, say no or yes, or even better, you have a tell that is instinctively saying yes? There's an old saying about if you're saying yes, you have to go back and think about why. Like, no means no, but if you're saying yes, you have to go back and say, do you really mean no? You have to look further into it. Like what's your analysis as you're analyzing, going further and further? Do you get to a point where you say, wow, this sounds right, but maybe it isn't right? Like, even going through your framework, is it, you talk about the decision tree, so to speak.
Yeah. And you're hitting on two important points. One, we are extremely process driven. Everything that I think about and learn, and I have a whole cycle to how I evaluate my own methodology on a quarterly and annual basis. But the one thing I want to hit on is this: how you get to know is very important. In two ways. One, up front, I spend most of my time trying to say no. I tell everyone, like, learn to kill what you love. You are going to fall in love with things, and you have to learn to kill them and realize when you're having an emotional response versus a logical investor response to a deal. So you have to learn to kill what you love, and you have to do that up front so you're not wasting your time. And you need to treat we also have we reply to all the people that spend time with us. We want every founder to know that we are rejecting them without insulting them, and we try to be as honest as possible. I think when you're looking at founders, a lot of people forget that even when you reject founders, you're talking to the next 10 founders they interact with, or the next 50. So the other thing about a no, though, is it's also very easy. It's easier to get to no than yes. And quite often, if you've gotten into those great deals where you push the boundaries of, especially on high risk deals, you'll feel after giving the founder or the team the yes, or the manager the yes, you'll have these doubts. And they'll come up because you'll surface your decision with a peer or a group that you respect. And it's always easier for your peers and people that you talk to question what you've just done. And this is one of the strongest tests of a manager. You have to learn to stick with yes when you know it's a yes. And so it's a good test to go out there and get conviction on a deal, and then go to other people and hear their objections, hear their criticisms, to lay yourself bare. But it's also probably your toughest challenge as an investor, is to pick a manager or pick a company, pick a deal, tell everyone what you're doing, lay it out there, and no one has any risk, right, but you. And so the easiest thing for them to do is criticize it. And it's also great because now you're inviting the world to come criticize you, and you have to say, do you believe? Did you come to this decision with the right conviction or not? And so I think, as an investor, whether you're the investor investing other investors or the investor investing companies, you need to be very reflective on how you do what you do. So if I can say anything, I don't believe in casual decisions. I don't believe in gut decisions, not in this respect, because this isn't combat. We don't have to make a 60% okay decision in a millisecond. We quite often have the time to make the right decision. So we document, and we have a pretty complicated pipeline and process as to how we do things. But I'd say the takeaways would be: try to say no early. Try to let people know why you say no. When you do get to yes, let other people challenge you with their no's, and ask yourself if you still believe in what you decided.
I'm glad you brought up the time to decision. Can you talk about the duration of your investments that you look at? I mean,
yeah. So
there's a lot of unicorns out there right now. Yeah. And I was talking to somebody on the phone the other day, and they were saying the IPO line is forever. There's 400 unicorns, but only so many can go public every year. But then at the same time, they were telling me, and then, the second question will be, so you talk about duration of investment. And then the second question is, do you ever look at alternative channels for liquidity events? Because this guy was like selling me on Australian stock exchange, telling me that there's been 20 fintech firms that have gone public in Australia and realized 10 to 20x valuation increases since going public. Okay, so thoughts that there's more than the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ to go public on, et cetera?
Yeah, 100%. So talk about two things. Yes, they're timelines. Yes, I have seen unicorns emerge in a year. And yesterday, one of my deals from actually Delta Force veteran I backed well over 9 years ago, just hit the unicorn mark. It's a big window. And it's part of why I'm looking at not just and why we decided, 5 years ago to stop only being early. When you have all early exposure, quite often you're looking, if you're lucky, at sort of 7 to 8 years before you get liquidity. Now I've seen it as soon as 1 year, and I invested very early in Bird when they had like 7, 8 people. And I stepped in and helped them hire 100 folks, and I raised $500 million for them. And we went from 50 million to $2.5 billion in valuation in a period of about 9 months. But that was a crazy competitive, probably too insane of an environment. The bigger question is the emerging landscape of liquidity in VC. And it's probably one of the more important points, especially when I'm looking for my own investments, but also looking at emerging managers. We're in a world where not just, Carta and 137 Ventures and Industry and Lexington, there's all these funds and marketplaces like Carta and others, and even angels to a degree now, providing liquidity. Small liquidity for angels to exchange, but also very massive liquidity. If you've never heard of a VC secondary market, it's an interesting space to look at. You can buy positions in VCs and strips of their funds. You can do founder secondary and get into, like right now, if you guys woke up and said, hey, I want to get into SpaceX or Airbnb or Stripe, like there are many ways to get in there. And that also means that if you were the investor in those assets, there's an opportunity for you to get liquid. The point is, when I started this business 12 years ago, we only had go public or get acquired. That was about it. And now we've got SPACs, we have secondary markets, we have the private markets, direct listings. I mean, there's even ICOs. You're watching people use crypto, which I'm not getting involved in that side of it. But the secondary market is going to be, my guess, rough, and I'll probably be underestimating this, 100 times bigger over the next decade than it is right now. VC has been one of those really illiquid asset classes, but there are enough interested parties and enough players building systems and enough data being pulled together that I think we're going to see a massive shift. It used to be that when you invest in a company, you couldn't sell and you shouldn't sell. You shouldn't sell because of the signal it sends to other people, and you couldn't sell because the markets didn't exist to transfer. That is all changing. Culturally, this belief that you should hold on to your investment forever is going away. And the markets that allow you to sell are being built right now. So I think secondary markets and liquidity are amazing. If you're an LP, this asset class isn't as risky as your advisor is probably telling you, right? You're thinking, hey, I just got locked up for 10 years, and it's complete bullshit. I have deals in our portfolio that are notionally, illiquid, that I could wake up tomorrow, and I've had multiple large funds out there try to buy our shares. Now we'll have to give them a 10, potentially 20, 25% discount, depending on the negotiation for that early liquidity. But your great assets really do have liquidity nowadays in venture.
Right. So we talked about liquidity. So and this is probably the last question, but can you talk a little bit about, you said you're tripling down on tech, right?
Yeah.
So, when you think about tech, I mean, I would think about like an escalator or like flying cars from the past or whatever. Yeah. And then I think about like home blood pressure kits.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tech, right? I've got a robot lawnmower, for example. Right?
Yep.
I mean, how big of a wave is it an overlay? Is it like 100% overlay? Or like how big of a wave and how deep do you think it's going to go? Is it Elon Musk chip implant deep? Or is it?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely on the science fiction. I'm on the science fiction side, but I'm also very practical. I didn't do a single VR investment or crypto investment in the last decade because I thought, for two very different reasons, but I do think about timing. Ultimately, I think where Elon's going is correct. We will have chips in our bodies. We will have biological computing. There are some things I don't know about, and I won't even go to those areas, but every aspect of our lives and our work will change with tech. And I will invest in hardware. I will invest in software. Essentially, when you're a tech investor, you're saying, look, I believe that software and hardware can replace human inefficiency and can accelerate value growth in ways that traditional business cannot. I don't need to throw humans. I don't need to throw factories. There's underutilized assets, whether it's pure software or pure hardware. And often I'm very interested in the integration of hardware and software into complex operational environments. As tech investors, we're simply looking to invest in high leverage, very fast growing companies.
Fantastic. Any more questions from the audience? I'm sorry, people were asking, what book are you reading these days, or what leads you to, any books of philosophy that lead you to where you are?
Yeah, I've got, I just came down to Rosemary Beach with a couple. One of them is this, I might get the title wrong, but I was talking to a founder in Nashville, and he recommended I read Trillionaire Coach. And so it's Bill Campbell's book on coaching and mentoring. It's apparently a great read, and it's all about how to make teams successful. I have another book recommended by a founder who sold to WeWork, and it's all about leadership and operational organization in the blue collar world. It's written by this doctor. This guy founded a huge business, sold to WeWork, and so I'm always looking for the things that drive other people that relate to the human condition. I read Cornelius Vanderbilt's biography ages ago. Had a big impact on me, and I realized there's all these people in life that you want to talk to, but you can't. But you can read their book, and not that it's all true, but you learn a lot through these biographies, and I learn a lot through just talking to founders and other folks in life. But those are a couple of things on my mind right now.
Yeah, I think perspective and point of view really matters a lot. Even if you don't get, you get the gist, and hopefully sometimes you get the germinated seed of what they're talking about. It's never easy. But Robert Mason has a question. Robert?
Hey, could you share maybe out of all the investments you've done, one that failed miserably and what you learned from it?
Oh, so many. I know this number. I live by. I've had 64 companies go to zero out of the 113.
Wow.
Yeah. And to ask me which one's the most painful, that's
what you learned from it. What you learned from it.
What I learned. What the obvious one is invest in the right people, and that's a nuanced thing that I'm getting better at. And there's a lot of early failure. You'll always fail. The one thing I've learned that I still sometimes feel like I'm going to mess it up is I meet a business. I imagine myself running that company, and we put ourselves on that founding team or that executive team. And you have to remember, even when you're sitting on the board, we're not running these companies, and it's a hard thing. I'm an operator, and I built companies to get here. And I also have to separate that. Is that me thinking where this business is going, or is that me honestly interpreting where this management team is telling me they're going to take it. That is probably one of my most consistent mistakes I've made over the last decade. And I just kind of realized it a few years ago. And it's an easy one to get into because you just go in the flow, and I start talking to people and I confuse my, oh wait, that's how I would do it, not how they would do it kind of feelings.
Mm-hmm. I have one quick question also, Paige. Do you ever look at, I get a lot of hairy deals. I get deals that should be perfect, but there's one thing wrong with it that doesn't work. Like I had a entrepreneur come to me, fantastic intellectually, just inability to build a team. Just couldn't make it happen. Finally, they added one person and that team worked perfectly. Did you ever run into that where you're like, wow, this could work, or is this not worth the time from your point of view to say, this is a hairy deal, I'm not getting into a hairy deal. I want to get into a team where the founder is right and the team is right away, and they're ready to cook.
That one depends. So I have a long list of things I will fix, things I won't fix, and things I'm still deciding if I want to keep trying to fix them. So founder surgery I've done quite often, and that's removing a founder, but not without letting them know. I've had a couple of these multi-billion-dollar companies require the pleasant removal, because you always want to try to do it nicely, removal or sidelining of a founder. That one I will sometimes do if I feel like the core founder is the right person to go all the way. I will work with non-technical founders. I have a huge bent to only invest in people who build or have builders on their team. I will occasionally look at a more business-oriented founder, but only if they're willing to learn and willing to let me or us now help them find someone to be their co-founder. There are a lot of things that I just won't try to fix. Slow learners, lack of experimentation, lack of boldness, a weak locus of control. There's all sorts of things there's things about people I can't change. I can't rebirth them, but there's functional skills and team weaknesses and structural issues with the cap table. I've fixed all sorts of things there. But I think for me, it's more character issues when you recognize them at a certain point and a certain age that we're funding people are never going to change. And no matter how much we want to hope that we can change them, it probably won't happen.
Got you, Paige. Listen, the people online and here, I said, this is a fantastic presentation. We should go on longer, but we have to get to our next panel of speakers.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Paige. And hopefully we'll see you again at one of our events. So thanks a lot.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. Y'all have a good day.